What is it to exist? To simply be. This very act of sitting here, speaking, breathing, is itself wrapped in a veil of mystery. And we've named this mystery 1,000 ways. Existence, being, the ground of all that is. Some have even dared to call it God. In a video I made recently, I spoke about the ontological argument for the existence of God and some of the refutations that have been offered over the centuries. A subscriber dropped into the comments to ask a question. Would you please consider making a video on the view that God is existence itself? My answer to that question is the journey on which we now embark. We will sail a sea of uncertainty, with currents driven by brilliant ideas and the ever more brilliant minds behind us. Let us weigh anchor and take in the lines. It's time to set sail and begin our epic journey to understand the idea that God is existence itself. In this video, we will examine the ideas of two seminal thinkers, Thomas Aquinas and Spinoza. And we'll also explore some of the refutations to the idea of God as existence itself. And we will also look at the problem of evil as it relates to the idea of God as existence. God as existence itself. What a strange, audacious idea. To say that God is not a being among others, not a craftsman shaping the cosmos, but the very act of being, the isness that underpins everything. A necessary being whose existence, whose essence is existence, who cannot not be. Thomas Aquinas tells us that everything we see, touch, and know is contingent. The chair beneath you could vanish. The stars could collapse. Even you and I, we are whispers held up by something greater. And that something, it must be existence itself, a necessary, unshakable foundation that is eternal. Aquinas' concept of God as subsistence being itself is grounded in Aristotle's metaphysics, but goes beyond it. For Aristotle, existence is actualized by an external cause, like when a sculpture brings a statue into being. Aquinas builds on this to assert in all creatures there is a metaphysical distinction between what they are, essence, and the fact that they are, existence. To Aquinas, in God there are no such distinctions. God's very nature is to exist. This leads to God being pure act, or actus purus, as Aquinas put it. Existence in its fullest, most actualized form. The unity of essence and existence in God underpins the doctrine of divine simplicity. God does not have existence as a property. God is existence itself. This lack of composition, no parts, no potentiality, makes God unchanging, eternal, and necessary. And this has some fairly significant philosophical implications. One such implication relates to causality and the ground of being, in that all contingent beings require a cause to bridge the gap between their essence and existence. This causal chain cannot regress infinitely, leading to the need of a being whose essence is existence, God. This positions God as the sustaining cause of all reality, not just a creator at the beginning of time. Another philosophical implication worth our attention is God's presence in creation. If God is existence itself, then God is intimately present in every act of being. Creation is not a one-time event, but a continuous act of sustaining all things. Another attention-worthy philosophical implication relates to the concepts of freedom and contingency. The contingency of created beings means they could fail to exist at any moment. Their existence is held in place by God, which underscores a radical dependence. But is all of this too abstract, too far removed from the world of suffering and joy, of hunger and hope? What kind of God is this, who has no face, no hands to comfort, no voice to speak? Is this God even personal? Or have we stripped away all the beauty, or the intimacy, and left behind only a cold, logical framework. Spinoza would say, yes, that is the point. God is not a father in the heavens or a king on a throne. God is infinite substance, the fabric of reality itself. Not being outside the world, but the world itself, its essence and its law. You, me, the trees, the stars, we are all modes of this infinite self-sustaining being. Spinoza's metaphysics rests on the principle that God, as infinite substance, encompasses everything. This leads us to the realization of the two most profound implications of the idea. The first of those profound implications is the concept of self-causation. God is, according to Spinoza, the cause of itself. This challenges some of the more traditional theistic views where God is an external creator and instead positions God as the intrinsic, self-sustaining reality. The second profound implication to which we turn our gaze is Spinoza's idea that God has infinite attributes. According to Spinoza, human beings perceive two attributes, thought and extension. But Spinoza argues that there are infinite attributes. This suggests a boundless, multi-dimensional reality beyond human comprehension. Spinoza's ideas and philosophy decimated the dividing line, the distinction between God and the world. This is often described as unity and non-duality. In Spinoza's view, all distinctions, like mind-body, subject-object, are modes of God's attributes. These distinctions are real on a relative level, but dissolve when viewed from the perspective of the infinite. As was the case when we looked at the ideas of Thomas Aquinas, there are some deeply profound and significant philosophical implications tied up in the ideas of Spinoza. In our efforts to examine these implications, we will start by considering immanence and transcendence. According to Spinoza, God is not outside the world, but is the very fabric of reality. This challenges traditional notions of divine intervention in miracles, reframing them as the unfolding of natural laws. But beyond immanence and transcendence, there are some ethical consequences worth our consideration. Spinoza's determinism suggests that understanding the divine order leads to ethical living. Human freedom lies not in opposing nature, but in aligning with it. Another implication for which our attention begs are the ideas of pantheism and pantheism. Spinoza is often seen as a pantheist, i.e. God is the universe. But his ideas also resonate with pantheism. God is the universe and beyond it. This view allows for both divine immanence and transcendence. But where does all of that leave us? If God is everything, does God care? Does God mourn our pain, our brokenness? Or is suffering just the price of existence? Evil nothing more than a shadow cast by the light of being. Aquinas would say, evil is privation, not substance. In the absence of goodness, it is the absence of goodness, the failure to fully participate in God. But tell that to the child in the rubble, to the mother burying her son, to the man whose heart breaks under the weight of the world. Can we really call God good if God is merely the existence that allows such suffering? And yet without existence there is nothing, no joy, no love, no hope. Can we curse the very ground we walk on? This is a problem. Maybe not the biggest of them all. This is a problem, maybe the biggest of them all. And we call that the problem of evil and suffering. As I said only a moment ago, Aquinas describes evil as privation. Not an entity or force in itself, but simply the absence of good. In classical theism, evil is understood as a lack of good, not created reality. This perspective has several layers worth looking at: the ontological status and God's role. So, according to thinkers like Aquinas, the ontological status of evil is that it has no substance or independent existence, and it is essentially parasitic on the good. Those same thinkers describe God as pure being and goodness. Therefore, God cannot be the direct cause of evil. Evil arises when creatures misuse their freedom or fail to fulfill their nature. This is their perspective on their role of God in the problem of pain and suffering. The problem of evil and suffering brings with it some baggage. That baggage comes in the form of some significant philosophical implications. So evil and non-being is the first of those implications we will briefly explore. Since all being participates in God, evil represents a retreat into non-being. This aligns with with existential views, where alienation and meaningless are forms of falling away from authentic existence. Another implication, an important implication, is the implication on freedom and theodicy, which basically means like vindication of God. Freedom is integral to existence. God grants creatures the ability to act, even if their action results in privation. And this, according to some, explains why God permits evil, to preserve the integrity of freedom and the dynamic unfolding of creation. The final implication we will look at concerns redemption and suffering. Suffering Suffering can be seen as part of a larger process of growth and return to God. And this echoes views in mysticism and existentialism, where struggles deepen one's participation in being. As you can see, the problem of evil and suffering is indeed problematic. To look upon it from a different angle, we are left with some unanswered questions, because the existence of God does not adequately resolve the problem of evil. If God is simply existence itself, this doesn't necessarily imply moral goodness. Why should existence, as such, be inherently good? After all, when you look upon the world, does it not appear as if existence is neutral, therefore encompassing both good and evil? We live in a world plagued by natural disasters, diseases, and moral evils. These are the features of our reality, all of which are part of existence and beauty. Why should we, when we gaze upon the world, automatically associate existence itself with some kind of divine goodness? The traditional explanation that evil is privation of being, or a lack of participation in God, has been criticized as being inadequate. Critics argue that it downplays the reality of suffering and fails to explain why a perfectly good God would allow beings to fall into privation. To put it more succinctly, the notion of evil as privation, a lack of good, is seen by many philosophers and thinkers as essentially a semantic maneuver that does nothing to address the tangible suffering and harm experienced in the world. So now that we've spent some time exploring the problem of evil and suffering, as well as the ideas of Aquinas and Spinoza, we can now turn our attention to some of the famous refutations of the idea of God as existence. In essence, we are now turning our head toward the skeptics, the empiricists and naturalists, the process philosophers and existentialists. They ask, why even invoke God? Existence, they say, is brute fact, needing no divine foundation. Or perhaps it is flux, a never-ending dance of becoming. To call existence God is to impose a human desire for meaning on a universe that may not care. The first refutation on our list is the concept of anthropocentrism in metaphysics. Anthropocentrism literally means human-centered, but in its most sort of relevant philosophical form, it is the ethical belief that humans alone possess intrinsic value. In contradistinction, all other beings hold value only in their ability to serve humans or in their instrumental value. The critique of anthropocentrism raises fundamental concerns about whether metaphysical ideas like God as existence are projections of human cognition rather than reflections of reality. The concept of existence is derived from human linguistic and cognitive frameworks. Critics argue that framing God as existence might reflect human intellectual limits rather than an ultimate truth. Heidegger critiques the metaphysical tradition for conflating being with beings, accusing it of failing to grasp the deeper nature of being itself. He suggests that identifying God with existence could be an extension of this error. Eastern traditions, like some forms of Buddhism, reject the notion of a single ground of being. Instead, they emphasize impermanence and interdependent origination, challenging the Western focus on static existence. Empiricists like David Hume and the later logical positivists challenged the intelligibility of God as existence by questioning the epistemic basis of metaphysical claims. For empiricists, the concept of existence itself is much too vague and abstract to be meaningful. Existence, they argue, applies to individual entities, not as an independent reality. David Hume said, "Existence is not a property, it is a relation we impose on perceptions. To say God is existence is to create a category error by reifying an abstraction." The logical positivists say statements like God is existence itself fails the verification principle because, try as we might, they cannot be tested or observed. And we also have natural explanations. Science provides robust accounts of existence through physical processes such as the Big Bang, quantum mechanics, and the theory of evolution, and so on, all without invoking a metaphysical ground. Critics like Bertrand Russell and A.J. Ayer argue that treating existence as a substantive entity leads to logical confusion. We call this the reification fallacy. The idea of existence itself mistakenly treats existence as if it were a thing or entity rather than a predicate that applies to things. For example, saying God is existence is akin to saying redness exists as itself. Existence is not subjective, but a property of subjects. Bertrand Russell argues that metaphysical postulates like God as existence are unnecessary hypotheses. Existence does not require a single ground. It may simply be a brute fact. Process philosophy critiques the static nature of the concept of God as pure being, emphasizing the dynamic and relational nature of reality. Philosophers like Whitehead and the much earlier Heraclitus argue that reality is fundamentally processual. A static God as pure being is incompatible with the ever-changing nature of existence. Whitehead said, "God is better understood as a participant in the process of reality, co-creating with the world rather than as a detached ground of being." Process theologians emphasize what we call relational theology. This just means God's dynamic relationship with creation. A purely static, unchanging God as existence itself cannot account for the relational and evolving aspects of the divine. And what of the existentialists? What do they have to say on the idea of God as existence? They challenge the relevance of metaphysical claims about God to the lived reality of human existence. Jean-Paul Sartre argues that identifying God with existence denies human freedom by imposing a predetermined essence or purpose. For existentialists, existence precedes essence, and meaning is self-created, not imposed by metaphysical frameworks. As an example, to say God is existence is to universalize a concept that denies the individuality and subjectivity of human experience. Heidegger critiques traditional metaphysics for alienating humans from authentic being. Identifying God with existence risks reducing human existence to a derivative or sort of secondary status. The idea of God as existence itself, while philosophically and theologically profound, faces substantial critiques that question its coherence, relevance, and explanatory power. These objections deepen our understanding by pushing proponents to refine their arguments. Anthropocentrism and abstraction highlight the need for metaphysics to transcend human cognitive limitations. Empirical and logical critiques demand clarity in how we conceptualize and justify metaphysical claims. Process and existentialist objections challenge the static and universalizing notions, calling for a more relational and dynamic understanding of reality. Ultimately, the debate reveals the tension between metaphysical abstraction and lived human experience, forcing us to grapple with the profound mystery of being itself. Despite everything, questions remain. Why is there something rather than nothing? Can we leave it unanswered? Some say we must. That to seek a final answer is to stare into the abyss of our own limitations. Heidegger whispers, being itself has been forgotten. Sartre cries, we are condemned to freedom. And the mystics, they laugh, for they know that truth is beyond words. But we cannot stop asking, because this question, this mystery of existence, it is the very air we breathe. Perhaps God is not a person but a presence. Not a creator but creation itself. Not one who watches, but the watching, the being that is. Or perhaps there is no God, and it is us who look upon the world and give it meaning. But what do I know? I'm a finite being reaching for the infinite, a shadow reaching for the light, a creature trembling before the vastness of existence, and in this trembling I stand here searching. Before we part ways, I just want to take the opportunity to thank you for your time and attention over this last 20 or so minutes. I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope you found it interesting and informative, and if you did, would you mind awfully liking the video and subscribing to the channel and all of those wonderful things like the YouTubers ask? And if you think I've misunderstood something, or I'm just plain out and out wrong, then jump in the comments and yell at me and tell me I'm stupid and I'm wrong. That way I get to refine my knowledge, and also so does everybody else, because they see it too. So thank you very much for your time and attention, and as I say, I hope you found it interesting, and I very much look forward to seeing you on the next one. Thank you.